So I wanted to create a sort of a synopsis of everything you guys learned last week into tips and tricks, because what we're going to be doing this week is you're going to be taking information and basically translating that information into a function. So each one of our functions will fall into this basic construct where we're either looking at sine or sometimes cosine. Now, sometimes C will be 0, sometimes D will be 0, because we won't be shifted left or right or up or down. Maybe we won't get those shifts. Or perhaps maybe B will be 1 because there won't be any transformations on the squish, right? The horizontal stretch compression. So sometimes that B will be 1 because it's having no impact. Or sometimes A will be 1 because it'll be sort of its parent function. So I'm going to focus on two things. One being the B, this refers to as our period, right? This is impacting our period. It's a transformation on the horizontal compression. And so this one right here and this one right here tend to be the most confusing questions, components, I guess. So let's make sure to focus on those today. So B, how do we get that? So B is always one of two things, sort of depending on which class you're in. So if you're in SL, all trig functions will be done in terms of 360 degrees. If you're in HL, all trig functions will be done in terms of radians. So sorry friends, that's just how it is. So kind of pay attention for both. So if I were looking at this question right here and I figured out that, hey, my period is too long, then what I would have is 2 pi over 2 or 360 over 2 would be the B that I'm putting into my function. Always, always just like that. Now there's a couple of different places that you might see this B. Sometimes it's really easily noted in the peak to peak. Sometimes it's easily seen in the trough to trough. Sometimes it's not easily seen at all. Sometimes you have to figure out where it is in terms of like this midline to midline. So if I were going from here over to here, anywhere I'm completing a full cycle, how long is that cycle is going to be our period. It could be somewhere weird. It could be like on this uptick right here to this uptick right here. It doesn't matter where you're doing it. It just has to be a complete cycle. And it'll always be the same. If the period's 2 here, the period's going to be 2 here. Now I know my drawing doesn't always look like that, but that's what it is. Okay, C, on the other hand, is a shift left right, and so that one can be a little bit tricky because you really need to make a decision on which function you're going to use. Are you going to use sine or are you going to use cosine before you decide what C is going to be? And I kind of have some tips for helping you guys think about which one exactly makes more sense given the construct of the question. So the parent sine function looks like this, right? It starts with its midline at the origin, and the parent cosine function starts here with its peak at the origin. So whenever you have a peak or a trough as your key information, that's when I'm going to go with cosine, okay? If for some reason if midline is the key information, or provided in the function in the task, then that means I'm probably going to go with a sine function. Okay. If neither one of those is provided, well, sorry, it's going to be way more difficult. I don't imagine you'll see any questions like that. But look, do I know where this is or do I know where this is? And that's how you're going to make these decisions, okay? So C is sometimes called a phase shift, and it's basically saying how far have I moved that thing, that key feature up here, how far have I moved that? So if I knew that this point right here were 2.3 over, then I would say that my C is just 2.3. So this would be A sine B of x minus 2.3. Remember, and there'd be some D, right, which is the up down. Remember, this 2.3 is being subtracted because it's moved forward, right? Transformations on the x are always opposite. Now, let's say I'm given information that my peak my first maximum or something like that, or one of my maximums is at 5.1. Well, now I know that my maximum got moved over 5.1, so this one would be a cosine b of x minus 5.1 plus some d. And the reason I've chosen cosine here versus sine is because I'm looking at information about a peak. Now, be really careful. If for some reason you're only given information about a trough, if this becomes your starting point that you're basing off of, if basing off of a trough, what's happening here is that our trough, we're going to treat it basically like it's a negative maximum. So what we end up doing is we make A be negative, and then we're saying like this point that was here got shifted or reflected down to this point, and then we'll do bx minus this new, let's say this is 2.1 plus d. And by making this a negative, we've taken the maximum and flipped it, made it the minimum. So we made a reflection there. Okay. Generally, you can do it from these though, and I think that's easier to just see if you can figure out where the maximum is, that left-right shift. Okay. The other two pieces you might be looking for, or you probably will be looking for, are the amplitude, which is A, and the midline, which is D. And if we were going to make a rule about these two rules are actually rather similar. So A is going to be the distance from the top to the middle, or the bottom to the middle. It's always the same number. And so what we'll do is we'll say, how far is it from the top to the bottom? Measure of distance, broken into 2. Okay, so it's half the distance from the peak to the trough. Whereas the midline is sort of an averaging of the two locations. So not distance, locations. So we're going to say if this is the max and this is the min, and I'm averaging those two components, okay, well then the midline is going to be the average of the max and the min. So we add them together, divide by 2. That'll always give us that value. So if this is 10 and this is 2, then the middle of those two numbers would be 6. So, oops, parentheses to make it look nice. So those are the 4 pieces of information you'll be looking for on each one of these questions.